What's up guys? So in this video I'm going to be going over how you as a Java programmer can learn Python quickly and easily because you should already understand the basics of Java and there's no need to start from scratch whenever you're trying to learn Python. I'm essentially going to be going over all of the syntax in Java and how you can translate it over into Python. They're very similar, but there are some key differences that you should know, and those differences are what I'm going to try to explain here in this video. So right off the bat, as you can see, I have Eclipse open on the left for Java, and then I have PyCharm open on the right. You can use any text editor for this video. You don't need to use PyCharm. I just like it because it's integrated for Python. It's all set up for the language itself, and I just enjoy all of the JetBrains IDEs. So the first thing that you'll notice is different is that whenever you create a file for Java, you're going to get this generic template where it creates a class and then it creates the main function. Whereas in Python, you don't really need anything like that. You can just start off with a clean slate, and any code you type in here will automatically get executed. You don't necessarily need a main function in the same way that you do in Java. The first statement that I'm going to be going over in this video is the print statement. So as we all know, in Java, it's system.out.println or just print without the ln. And in the parentheses and quotation marks, you just type in your message, so hello world. But whereas in Python, you don't need all of this extra fluff around it. You just can type in print parentheses and then either a single or double quotes and then the same message. And if I run it in Python, we'll get hello world in here. If I run it in Java, we will obviously also get hello world. So this is essentially all there really is to it. In the print statement, you just need the keyword print and then the message. And one thing that you do need to keep in mind is you don't need double quotes. Single quotes are used interchangeably in Python and they work just as well. Either one does the same exact thing. Another thing I want to mention is that the print statement in Python automatically gives you a new line. And what I mean by that is if I just copy and paste this line, so we have it twice, and I run it, the second line will show up underneath it, despite not having ln after the word print inside of the statement. It automatically defaults it to a new line, and that's just something that you should keep in mind. Another thing that I want to mention is that you can obviously do math operations here inside of the print statement. For example, if I type in 1 plus 2 and I press run, it's going to output 3 down here in the terminal. I also want to mention that let's say that I want to have text and then I want to append an integer afterwards. So if I want to say like in quotation marks 1 plus 2, and then I want to show the output right after, so I can say like I'll put an equal sign in here for example. I don't need to say plus. What you can do is just put a comma and then either you can say 3 or you can just type in 1 plus 2 for it to add it for you. Either one does the same thing, but whenever you want to have multiple things inside of the print statement, you can just separate them with commas and it will automatically put a space right there for you in between them. Whereas obviously in Java, if we wanted to do the same thing, then we would have to do something like this, where I would say 1 plus 2 inside the quotes, and then I would need to add the plus sign and then the number 3. This plus sign is the same as this comma. They both do the same thing because if I run it right here, we will get 1 plus 2 equal sign space. Actually, we don't get a space in Java. We just get the 3 right after the equal sign. But yeah, that's essentially the difference in the print statements. It's a little shorter in Python, it's a little more concise and easier to read. And yeah, the next thing that I want to mention about Python is variables. So as we all know, in Java you have integers, you have doubles, floats, strings, characters, character arrays, all of that jazz. Whereas in Python, whenever you create a variable, you don't need to declare any types. So for example, in Java, if I want to make two variables like int a equals 1 and then int b equals 2, and then I want to do int c equals a plus b, well, in Python, you can literally just say a equals 1, b equals 2, and c equals a plus b. I guess I forgot to mention that there's no semicolons in Python. You just enter to go to a new line and it automatically knows that's the end of the line. You don't have to have any semicolons anywhere. It is not required at all in this language. But yeah, these 3 lines are equivalent to these 3 lines over here. In Java, we declare that they're integers. In Python, it just knows they are. You don't have to say anything about it. Like, let's say we just want to print C to see what the output is. If I run this, we get 3.2. It automatically just understands what their types are and does the correct math operations. Whereas in Java, obviously, if we want to change this to 1.2, we have to change A and turn it into a double. And then we're going to get an error because now it's adding a double to an integer, so we have to change C to a double. And then we would be able to run it and get the same output. Actually, we have to print it, but you guys get the point. So I guess if you guys want to see the output, let me just print that real fast. And right there on the bottom, we get 3.2, just like in Python. And the next thing I want to mention is comments in Python. So Python has its own version of single line and multi-line comments. For a single line comment, you're going to use a hashtag or a pound sign, which is just shift and then the number 3. And then you can type out whatever you want. And then if you want to have a multi-line comment, you're going to use 3 apostrophes. And then it's in PyCharm, it'll automatically give me 3 more. And then whatever you write between these 2 groups of apostrophes will be a comment as well. And so obviously the multi-line comment is equivalent to the / in Java. So this is equivalent to this, and then the single line comment is equivalent to 2 / for a single line comment. So these are the comments in Java that translate into these comments in Python. So the next thing that I want to talk about is how to get input from the user in Java and Python. So as we all know, in Java you have to create a scanner as a variable. So we'd say scanner input equals new scanner, and then say system.in, throw a semicolon on there. And then to read a variable, we would just say like int x equals input.next int, and then we can just like print it out at the end. So system.out.println x. And to do the same exact thing in Python, it's going to be pretty similar, but just a lot shorter. So we would just say x equals input parentheses, and then we can actually type a message as a prompt for the user. So we can say just type a number, and now that number is going to be saved as the variable x, and then we can just print it back to them. So if we run this in Java, it's going to wait for us to type in a number. Let's say 5, press enter, and it prints back 5 for us. And in Python, if I run, it's going to say type a number. If I type in 5, press enter, it prints back 5. So to get input from the user, we would just use the input keyword, type in the prompt, and then save it as a variable. And this works for anything. It works for integers, floats, doubles, and strings. So it works the same way for all of them. I mean, I can literally just go in here, run this again, and type in a whole sentence. So just like, hey guys, and it will still print back hey guys, and the value of x is hey guys. And so yeah, that's how getting input from the user works in Python. The next thing that I want to talk about is how to create an if statement in Python and how it compares to Java if statements. So let me just comment out these 2 lines. And it's obviously in Java, to create an if statement, you use the word if, parentheses, the condition you want, and then what you want to happen in some curly braces afterwards. So let's say if like the variable b from up above is greater than 0, we want to do something, and then else it'll do something else. So if b is greater than 0, then we will print that b is greater than 0, and we'll say else, we'll say b is less than 0. So to do the same exact thing as this if statement in Python, all we have to do is type in the word if. And then a key difference between if statements in Python and Java is that in Python you don't use parentheses for the condition. Instead, we just put a space and then the condition that we want to check. So we say if b is greater than 0, and then as opposed to using a curly bracket, we're just going to type in a colon. This is a common theme for all the things that typically would have curly brackets surrounding them in Java are just going to have a colon at the location of where you would have put the opening curly brace, and then everything that would have gone in between the curly brackets in Java is just going to be indented in Python. So as you can see, if I press enter, it's going to automatically indent it by 1 tab. So if I just delete this and tab it over, it'll be the exact same thing. And then whatever I type in here on all the lines after this if statement are going to happen if this condition is true. So I can say print bigger. I can do another print statement. B is 2. I can whatever you want. Everything that is indented is going to get run if this condition is true. And then for my else, I have to unindent, type the word else, put another colon on there, and when I press enter, everything that we want to happen if this condition is false needs to be indented after this else statement. So let's just print less. And so now if I run this, it's going to check if b is greater than 0. Forgot to take off these 2 lines, so let's just type a number. And now it prints out bigger and b is 2 because b is greater than 0, and it doesn't run anything in the else block. So yeah, that's how if statements work in Python. They're relatively similar. You just have to keep in mind that you need to end the if statement with a colon and then indent all the lines that are in its block in order for it to register as 1. And yeah, that's how if statements work. For for loops, they're also kind of similar. So let me just create a quick for loop in Java and then translate it over into Python. So we'd say for int I equals 0, I is less than 10, then I plus plus, and then let's just print the value of I for each iteration. To do the same thing in Python, all we have to do is we still use the for keyword, but then instead of parentheses and then creating a variable I, we just say I, and then we use another keyword called in, and then we use a function called range of how many iterations we want it to go through. So let's just keep it consistent and type in 10. And then we end this line with a colon just like we did up above with the if statement. And now it's going to auto indent it for us because whatever is next is going to happen as a result of the for loop. And then we can just go in here and print the value of I. So these 2 lines right here are equivalent to this for loop right here in Java. So now if I run this, let me just comment out the input lines. We run this, and we're going to get 0 through 9 printed back to us. And if I run it in Java, we are also going to get 0 through 9 printed back to us. Just like that. And so for loop, this is the for loop notation that you're going to want to use. Just make sure that you use the words in, range, and then the number of iterations that you want it to go through. And before I talk about like enhanced for loops, I'm just going to quickly mention how lists work in Python and how they kind of compare to arrays in Java. So let's go ahead and create just like an integer array in Java. So we would say like int ages, put the brackets on there, and then space, and then let's just populate it from the get-go. We'll say like 10, 20, 15, 30, 40, 12, and just close that off. So here we have an integer array of ages. To create the same thing in Python, we can say ages equals, and then we are going to use a square bracket and then type in all of the numbers. So 10, 20, 15, 30, 40, and 12. So this right here is how you would create the integer array in Python that matches this integer array in Java. One thing I do want to note is that arrays in Python are actually called lists, and they're going to be the same notation for whether it's integers like this one right here, or if it's strings or doubles, they're all going to be the same. And so now to loop through a list in the same way that we would do like an enhanced for loop in Java. So like let's say we want to replicate this for loop for int I, and then we would use like a colon, and then we would say ages, square curly brace, and then let's just do like, let's just print the value of I, system.out.println I. So in the same way that we would do this in Java, we could type this out in Python. So for I in ages, colon, and then print I. So an enhanced for loop is, we would just have a variable that we're going to refer to each value as, and then the name of the list that we want to iterate through. So this for loop right here and this for loop right here are going to give us the same exact output. If I run this and I run it in Java, as you can see, we get the exact same output from 10 to 12 for both of them. So that's how for loops work in Python. The next thing that I want to clarify is while loops. So let's go ahead and just create a quick example in both languages. Let's say we want to have a while loop that checks. So while, let's use b from up above, and let's say while b is greater than 0, and then a curly brace, we will just print out the value of b, and then we'll reassign it to a new value from the user's input. So we'll say b equals input.next int. And so if we want to do the same thing in Python, we would type in while b is greater than 0. As you can see, there's no parentheses. We just throw a colon at the end of that, and then all the lines in the while loop need to be indented by 1 tab. To match it, we just type in print b, and then we would say b equals input, and we can type in a prompt message saying type a value for b. So now if I run this here and in Java, it'll keep looping in both of them until the value of b becomes something that is less than 0. So if I type in 5, it'll prompt us again, and then if I type in like -10, press enter, the code stops executing. And in Python, it'll do the same thing. If I type in the value of like 5, we get an error because that's how life goes. The reason for that is that the program is interpreting the user's input as a string because we are typing it back to it. So we just have to convert that to an integer, and to do that, all you got to do is type in int, and then wrap whatever we're trying to convert in parentheses to convert that over into an integer. So let me run that one more time. Type in a value for b, like number 5, checks it, that's greater than 0, so it runs through it again. We give it 3. Now if we give it like a value of -10, press enter, it'll say process finished with exit code 0. So that's how while loops translate into Python. The next thing that I want to touch on is functions. So in Java, whenever you create a function or a method, you have to declare if it's public, private, or protected, and then give it a return type, give it the name, and then input the parameters. For example, let's quickly create a method that will just add up 2 values. So let's say public integer get sum for the name, and then pass in 2 variables or parameters. So int a and then int b. And in here, we're just going to return a plus b. So let's quickly create this function over in Python. To do that, we're going to start at the beginning of the line, and then we're going to use a word or a keyword called def. Def is used whenever you're creating a function. So you'll say def define space the name of the function that we want to make, so get sum. And by the way, I mean, we can obviously, like, this notation works in Python. We're not going to get any errors, but it is common practice instead of using camel case, separating words with an underscore and keeping everything lowercase in Python. It's just a good habit to have. And then to input the parameters that we want, all we have to do is just type in their names, and we don't need to give it any data types. So we just say a comma b, and then at the end of the function declaration we just throw a colon there, press enter, and then indent everything that goes inside of this function by 1 tab length. And then to return a value, we would just say return a plus b. Now this function is going to do the exact same thing as this function over here in Java. Just keep in mind that we don't have to say whether it's public or private, and we don't have to give it a return type, nor do we have to actually return anything. We can just do whatever we want in here, not return at all, and we won't get any errors. And if you do want to return, you also have that liberty as well. Now let's just go in here and call the function in both languages and just verify that their output is going to be the same. So let's print back the output in Java, so system.out.print, and we'll say get sum, pass in the numbers 5 and 10, and throw a semicolon there. And I guess we have to just convert this to a string, so I'm just going to add on some like quotation marks here, get sum, and just convert that function to static so that we can call it without having an instance of the class. Let's save this, let's run it, and we got to get out of this while loop that waits for a negative number, so let's pass in -1, and we get 15. And so up here in Python, if I want to call the function, let me go in here, type in get, or let's say print get underscore sum, and then pass in the same numbers 5 and 10, press run, enter a value for b that's negative, so -10, and we get 15 just like we did in Java. So that's how functions work. Another thing that I want to mention about Python is that it definitely does support Boolean data types, but you just got to keep in mind that whenever you use them, so let's say we have like t equals true, you have to have a capital T in the word true in order to avoid errors. And then obviously for false, it's going to be a capital F. So that's one other difference between the two languages. And yeah, I think that really wraps up all of the basic differences between Java and Python. I didn't really go into too much depth about how to use Python. I just wanted to clarify the key differences in the most common things people do with Python for the experienced Java programmer that just wants to quickly understand the syntax differences between the two languages. If you have any questions, just be sure to leave a comment down below and I will be happy to answer it as soon as possible. If this video was useful for you, be sure to just give it a big thumbs up. And if you're interested in coding and you want to learn some more, be sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and have a great day, guys. Peace.